All right, and we begin the bulletin with the Quad Summit. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with leaders from the U.S., Japan, and Australia at the Quad Leaders Summit in Delaware. U.S. President Joe Biden chose his hometown of Wilmington to host the summit for Quad leaders. In his opening remarks, Prime Minister Modi said that the Quad is not against anyone, but for a rules-based international order and respect for sovereignty. He also said that free, open, inclusive, and prosperous Indo-Pacific is India's priority. Described the grouping as a force of global good. He added that Quad is here to stay, partner, and contribute. At the summit, Quad leaders have appreciated India for its leadership role in the Indian Ocean. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said that India is a predominant power in the Indian Ocean under Prime Minister Modi. And Biden said that the U.S. has things to learn from India's experience and leadership in the Indian Ocean. The American president also said that during the summit that China continues to behave aggressively in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait, and that the president, Xi Jinping, is using diplomacy to advance his country's interests. Further, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida extended support for organizing Voice of Global South summits. This is the 6th edition of the Quad Summit and is a farewell summit for both Biden and Kishida. India will be hosting the next Quad Leaders Summit in 2025. As per officials, leaders from the four nations rolled out plans to expand on Indo-Pacific partnership for maritime domain awareness to include the Indian Ocean region. Now, they have also announced a joint cancer initiative. Biden has revived cancer moonshot with Quad backing. On the sidelines of the Quad group meeting, Modi has also held bilateral talks with Japanese Prime Minister Kishida. Earlier in the day, Prime Minister Modi held bilateral talks with President Biden. The two leaders discussed how to improve their partnership and exchanged views on regional and global issues. Prime Minister Modi will now head to New York, where he will address a gathering of the Indian community. He will be interacting with the CEOs of leading U.S.-based companies to foster cooperation in AI, quantum computing, semiconductors, and biotechnology. Now, this is Modi's longest ever visit to the U.S. as Prime Minister. During his visit, he will also address Summit of the Future at the UN General Assembly in New York on September 23rd. The theme of the summit is multilateral solutions for a better tomorrow. Now, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called this a once-in-a-generation UN summit. Now, on the sidelines of the summit, Prime Minister Modi will also hold bilateral meetings with several world leaders and discuss issues of mutual interest. All right, for the latest, our correspondent Susan Teradi is joining us live from New York now, where all the action is taking place. Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us in the morning. Of course, it's a different time there, but let me begin by asking you, what is the latest that you can bring in from the ground?
Yeah, there is so much to talk about regarding deliverables, not only between Prime Minister Modi and Biden after that bilateral discussion, where at least two statements came out from the White House, but also a deliverable from the Quad meeting as well. They include for the first ever joint Coast Guard exercise between Quad countries. Also, an expansion of an initiative aimed in part at monitoring illegal fishing and collaboration to help reduce cervical cancer rates in the Indo-Pacific region, what you alluded to, that moonshot initiative that's very close to President Biden's heart. This is according to administration officials. But then if we really go deeper into what they want to achieve ultimately as a group, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief for one another, quality infrastructure, ports are very important, notably in the Indo-Pacific region, cybersecurity on everyone's mind, and perhaps one of our favorite, my own personally, is the people-to-people initiatives that they want to expand. Quad fellowships, Quad scholarships, as well as cultural exchanges between the four countries. So in the coming hours and days, we're going to hear a lot more about these deliverables. But it's safe to say that they really wanted to cement this relationship before President Biden leaves office. And as you mentioned, also Fumio Kishida of Japan as well.
Right. Now, talking about that, now, Indian Prime Minister said that he talked about free, open, inclusive, and prosperous Indo-Pacific is India's priority. What more can you tell us about the meet between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Kishida, as well as Prime Minister Albanese?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. You know, a lot has been made about defense cooperation as well, and it was very important for that deliverable and statement, the Wilmington statement they called it, to come out and say that India remains neutral, notably in the Ukraine and Russia conflict, but India does believe that every country deserves its sovereignty and territorial integrity under United Nations international law. And then, of course, one by one, these leaders, came out and talked about the things that are most important to them. For President Biden, of course, it's this moonshot initiative. For Albanese, again, it's, a lot of defense capabilities. Remember, Australia is also part of AUKUS and is sort of waiting on those submarines from the United States. And of course, Japan technologically, and also, with disaster relief and humanitarian aid, is really relying on its Quad partners. But all in all members really want to see a free, safe, and open Indo-Pacific region. And while at the beginning, they mentioned that this is not against a certain country, but China was on everyone's mind, notably President Biden, who at first said that, this is not a meeting against China, but then he was caught on a hot mic. I think you mentioned it as well, where he talked about how Xi Jinping is aggressively pursuing his agenda in the South China Sea and regarding Taiwan and elsewhere. So the hot mic sort of picked that up as he was talking to the leaders. He didn't really announce that.
All right. Now, there's also to know that this is taking place before the November elections, and it is the last Quad summit for both Kishida and Biden. Now, on being asked about the future, Prime Minister Modi has asserted that it's going to stay. But how do you look at the future of a Quad after the November elections?
Yeah, it's really interesting that this question keeps coming up. Of course, many agree with Prime Minister Modi, and President Biden mentioned that as well. The Quad predates President Biden and the Biden administration and Fumio Kishida as well. It started in 2004 as a disaster relief assistance for Japan. It expanded in 2007, and then it really reinvigorated, and President Trump was able to sort of reinvigorate the Quad with high-level meetings between the countries. And then, of course, President Biden, again, reinvigorated it with leadership conferences regarding the Quad. So it's hard to imagine whether or not another administration would not benefit from the Quad and want Quad to succeed and expand even further. Kamala Harris, being a Democrat, she's probably going to pursue Biden's foreign policy. And of course, we know how President Trump feels about the Indo-Pacific region, China in particular, partnership with India and the other countries. He was very supportive of the Quad and really wanted to expand it on many levels. I mean, America is looking east no matter what.
All right, Susan, of course, we'll be looking forward for all the developments and Prime Minister Modi's address at the UN. We'll be, of course, having you again for that.